agencies attached to the UN do a great deal of humanitarian work. Many people wonder what would become of such relief efforts if the UN were abolished.
Has there been good done by the World Health Organization and some adjuncts of the UN? Yes. Would it be done without the UN? Yes. In fact, most of the wherewithal for those programs has come from us, from the American taxpayers.
It's private charitable organizations that are involved in the hands-on business of ministering to the hungry and to the sick and to the destitute, and they do so without exacting the political surcharge that inevitably is part of government-sponsored charity, including UN charity.
UN Millennium Summit, they're calling it We the People.
In the face of increasing disenchantment with UN performance, supporters insisted that the UN be allowed to fulfill the vision of its founders.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
Proponents promise a world of peace, security, and justice if only the UN is given sufficient support and authority.
Today we must develop federal structures on a global level. To deal with world problems, we need a system of enforceable world law, a democratic federal world government.
Some supporters were even more enthusiastic about the prospects for world government. Robert Wright of the New Republic writes, "America is surrendering its sovereignty to a world government. Hooray! World government is coming. Deal with it." But the actual plans for a UN world government were developed in secrecy, and the ultimate aims remain largely hidden from the general public today. Yet, in a foreign edition of Newsweek, senior editor Michael Hirsch was surprisingly candid about this deception. The internationalists were always hard at work in quiet places, making plans for a more perfect global community. They haven't bragged about their globe building for fear of reawakening our berserker nationalism, and so they have always done it in the most out-of-the-way places and with little to do.
The founders of the United Nations, unlike the founders of the United States, understood that they could not sell their product to the American people because they knew that the native intelligence of the American people would lead us to reject the proposal of doing away with our independence and embracing a completely contradictory vision of government.
Opponents of world government affirm that misleading the public into giving up national sovereignty can't possibly serve the interests of liberty.
On behalf of the United Nations, I express my gratitude to the multinational force and to the United States of America.
Consolidation of governing power into a world body would override the rules established by local cultures. Global government also means that the governed would be forced to live under rules set by distant bureaucrats who don't necessarily have to abide by them. The Founding Fathers used a word to describe such remote, consolidated, and arbitrary power: tyranny.
Some of the scaremongers have proposed that the UN is going to one day soon send blue-helmeted troops to rampage across American soil and shut down our liberties. Well, that's not what's happening at all. What's happening is that our leaders are delivering us into the United Nations.
And some people think that our own government is going to protect us from the threat the United Nations represents. They don't understand that the United Nations, to ambitious men within our government, represents a way that they can enhance their own power outside of the channels of accountability contained in our Constitution.
If we give up our sovereignty, that means that we give up our independence, our ability to act within that framework which has given us the freedom, the prosperity, and all of those things which are so dear to us as Americans.
Americans do have a choice. They can do nothing and let others decide what kind of government they will live under, or they can get involved.
But, you know, this is really important too. And I want to tell your viewers this, what he's saying and what we're talking about, it's really on the heels of an executive order that was signed about 7 days ago. And people probably don't know about it, but Obama signed Executive Order 13391, the Patriot Defense of Liberty Act. And what this allows, and it's tied into Agenda 21, it allows the United Nations, the UN troops basically will occupy all federal land up to 250,000 troops, and it will only take a matter of hours for them to get here because they've been planning this for a long time. As you know, a lot of troops have been UN troops have been rehearsing this in the United States for quite some time. So that's important too, and they're getting ready to really put the final death grip on all Americans. So you know, we got to get this message out, and the more we educate, the more we wake up. I truly believe we can stop this through peaceful means. At least I hope we can.
Mm-hmm.